This hyperkinetic anime adaptation debuted in 2008 to dismal reviews and even worse box office receipts. But was this lack of performance justified? Join us to find out as we analyze the Wachowski Speed Racer right here on Esoterica Cinema. Hello peoples and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me as always is the man who spent 7 years living in South America after being adopted by a family of capybaras, Mr. Ryan Seabold.
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
I am doing well. I have not had the pleasure of living amongst such docile and wonderful creatures, but I'm sure it was lovely.
Absolutely. You know, we have those here in Florida. Maybe I brought them here, maybe I didn't. None of your business.
What you gonna do? Want to fight about it?
Big whoop. Want to fight about it?
But we're not here to discuss capybaras. No, we are here to discuss a film called Speed Racer. A very divisive film. Ryan, do you have a description for us, sir?
Damn right I do, Jason. I love this film. We're going to get into all that very quickly. But yes, today's film is 2008's Speed Racer, directed by the Wachowskis. Google has this described as: born into a family business of race cars, Speed Racer, played by Emile Hirsch, is one of the track's hot stars. Sitting at the wheel of his Mach 5, he consistently deflates his competition. When Speed turns down an offer from the head of Royalton Industries, he uncovers a secret. Powerful moguls fix the races to boost profits. No, corporate America! Corporate greed! Hoping to beat the executive, Speed enters the same arduous cross-country race that killed his brother. Like I said, this was directed by the Wachowskis, shot by David Tattersall, edited by Roger Barton. This was made on a budget of $130 million, roughly, plus P&A. They blew the bank on this sucker and only brought in $93 million. Womp womp. So, if my understanding is correct, my friend, I think we're going to have a little sparring match today. We're going to have a little at odds between you and I about this film. I really enjoyed it. But before we get too far down that road, I got to ask you, as always, my friend, what did you think about this movie?
Ryan, going to be happy to tell you. First, do want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you are listening to the podcast, we appreciate you. If you are watching on YouTubes, we appreciate you. Please do follow, like, subscribe. Really helps us out with the algorithms. And also, tell your friends if you're enjoying what you hear. Now, let's go ahead and get into our opening statements, Ryan. High level, I have to admit, I hated this film. I wanted so hard to like it, but I did. I just absolutely hated it. I found it, like I said in the cold open, a tedious, exhaustive slog. And look, again, I'm a dude that loves video games and monsters and robots and ridiculous stuff. So I so came in wanting to love this film. I thought I was going to love this film, but to me, it literally felt like a children's cartoon. And look, I will say it's effective in that regard. You can tell the Wachowskis set out to make a live-action children's cartoon, and they crushed that. But in that regard, it's like watching 2 hours and 15 minutes of G.I. Joe or Transformers from the early 80s, right? That's awesome when I'm 7 years old, but a lot less so at, let's say, the age I am now. Ryan, how about you?
Well, Jason, high level, I love this film. It was a wonderful homage to the classic cartoon, but it stood on its own as an intense raucous thrill ride. Now, I'll admit, this did feel like a plot we've seen before. Also, the acting is an obvious homage to the cartoon characters, which sometimes worked and other times did not, especially when they're up against the green screen and everything else. That was all kind of brand new at the time, but we'll get to all that here shortly. But this is a very, very fun film, almost despite itself sometimes. From the matte white transitions to the colorful F-Zero style racetracks, I was glued to the screen for 2 hours, never once feeling distracted. Even the slower moments, like the ones between Speed and Trixie in the car, were so beautifully shot by Tattersall with the hyperkinetic blues and everything else. Everything just seemed like it was dipped in 80s synthwave, like chocolate in an ice cream cone. And damn if I wasn't here for it. I could sum up how I feel about this movie in 4 words.
Go, Speed Racer, go!
All right, well, certainly different reactions there. Real Team Ryan versus Team Jason situation we got going on. For anybody who is watching and listening, please, go ahead and send us an email, esotericacinema@gmail.com, or leave a description in the comments if you're on the YouTubes. Let us know if you loved or hated this movie before we even begin. And look, I mean, frankly, it looks like we got ourselves a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff, sir.
Bring it on, buddy. Bring it on.
So let's go
See
ahead
you
and
at
get
high
into
noon.
it, man. Let's go ahead and get into it here. And so, look, I think that when you start off with this film, it's a classic example of the age-old discussion of style versus substance, right? This is an artistic debate that has happened literally since the dawn of art, you know? And in my opinion, when I look at this film, this is designed to be all style, no substance. It's a treat for the senses, but it's at the expense of stimulating that gray matter that we have up here, right? So it's like a ton of bright colors, loud sound effects, you know, the creative matte transitions you've mentioned, those are awesome. We've got these hugely colorful, bombastic locations, but like when you want to talk about some of the building blocks of cinema and film, you know, we're talking about like narrative progression, right? Character relationships and dynamics, even some of the thematic examinations that should just be right there surface level in a film like this, talking about, the joy of racing and destiny and, envy when it comes to, the older brothers and the enemies and all of this, and even just, good old fashioned American competition, right? All of that should be right here. And yet I feel like it's just all absolutely left on the table. So Ryan, I was going to ask if you agree or disagree with this statement, but based on that initial one, I'm going to have to assume you disagree, but let's go ahead and hear your response to what I just put out there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you, Jason. The substance here, you're absolutely right. This is a question that is a tale as old as time, right? And we've had this discussion when it comes to Suspiria, for example, just a few weeks ago. Also, even Mad Max, all the style versus the substance, all the hypersaturated colors and everything else, and all the frenetic editing versus the story it was trying to tell. So this is something that we've tackled at least a few times here on this very show. And I think in this particular case, definitely the style overrides the substance. I'm not going to disagree with you 100%. I'm also not going to come on camera and say that it worked 100% of the time. There were a lot of the subplots that kind of fell a little short for me, definitely. Okay. Some of the acting or performances kind of felt a little stilted at times, but it wasn't a total loss. When this movie came out, I heard that it was a total turd sandwich, and I avoided it like the plague.
Same.
But then when I came back and got to it finally, I was sucked in right from the opening Warner Brothers logo and all the hyperkinetic shapes and colors that it pulls in like a kaleidoscope.
Sure.
It was just a fever dream, and the editing and the breakneck pacing was absolutely fantastic. The blending of styles with the cinematography going from realistic to CGI back to real, I thought was done very well most times. The camera movement was very dynamic. I thought they did a really good job of starting on the racetrack, and then as the race cars get close to you, the camera zooms in on speed as he's in his car. All the colors are going across his visor, and then we pull back out as the race cars zoom past and down the track to go do dynamic things. I thought it was phenomenal. I was in love with this film from the very first frame all the way to the last. The breakneck pacing and the editing, and we're going to get to that here shortly, but it was so crazy how with those matte transitions you were mentioning a moment ago and things like that,
Sure.
It almost felt like one long scene. They barely gave you any time to breathe. Like you were just going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. There wasn't any kind of fade out or fade in. I don't know if they did
Sure.
that once. So I think that the substance here or any kind of emotion that it was trying to derive is fun. It was really fun. It was just lighthearted. If it failed at anything, I think that the main thing that kind of took me out is who is this movie for? Because at times
Sure.
it did feel like a children's
absolutely.
movie, which I'm totally cool with a children's movie. If it wants to be The Incredibles or like Wall-E or something like that, great, I'm down to clown. But then at other times, it tried to deal with more mature concepts, and the drama seemed a little heavy-handed, and the actors were a little more toned to that. I would even add that Emile Hirsch's performance seems like it's trying to be in that movie. And then you've got everybody else that's trying to be in a kid's movie. So the separation of that, and even I think the Racer X subplot was all towards that adult side of it. Like if I was going to say one thing stood out to me that didn't work, it's the kind of incoherence of those two themes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot there to unpack for sure. So let me specifically talk to you about like the structure and of the screenplay and the narrative progression of the story and all of that, right? Because to me, it's like, we'll analyze this, right? We look at screenplays, we look at 3-act structure, all of this. And when I look at this film, it's all over the place, right? Because it takes about, so we've got this first 45 minutes, okay? And it's kind of setting up the world. And within that, we've got like, okay, Speed is a racer and he's seemingly like this neurodivergent kid that like can't focus and is like super like can't even do anything in class except, you know, be a racer. And so, but it's also weird because then when he grows up, to your point, Emile Hirsch plays this very sort of like reserved type of role. And it's almost like he's like quiet and like sad. And like I said, he's in like a serious drama. So first of all, it's kind of weird that like, I feel like Speed as a kid is more like the little brother as we go later. So there's some inconsistencies there. But if we look at the fact that like within the first 45 minutes, we know that Speed Racer is, and that's his actual name, by the way, which like groan-inducing, that his name is Speed. So I have to talk about the movie Speed Racer while also talking about the character Speed Racer. Anybody watching and listening, if you don't understand the difference, that's on the Wachowskis, not me, okay? Or actually the creator, because I know that's how it was in the anime. But so we've got it where, you know, he's racing and then he gets almost recruited by this like evil corporation, and you know, he ends up saying, no, thanks, I'm going to keep racing him on my own. And he's like, I'll get you next time, Speed Racer, right? And so it takes about 45 minutes to do all that. Here's my question to you, Ryan, okay? This is a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, which means we have 90 more minutes from the point that Speed Racer says, I'm not going to be part of your organization, bad guy, and I'm going to keep racing, okay? My direct question to you, summarize in as much or as little detail as you want what happens across the next 90 minutes narratively. Go.
Fun happens, Jason.
Fun happens in 90 minutes.
So 90 minutes of awesome. What do you want from me? Yes, absolutely.
And that is exactly my point. That is exactly why I had such a problem with this movie, because you go 45 minutes in and you've given me all your tricks. You have divulged all of your tricks and put them out there 45 minutes into the movie. So the rest of the 90 minutes, which is twice that amount of time, you're just doing the same thing over and over because you haven't given me any substance. I have nothing to go off of narratively. I don't care about the relationships. I don't really give a shit about Speed and Trixie's will they, won't they? Like, we know they're going to, and it's a cartoon relationship anyways, right? So what you're telling me is that the second 45 minutes and the third 45 minutes are exactly like the first 45 minutes. And that just makes me feel like drunk when I watch this movie. Like there's just like scenes from this. When I try to recollect this movie, wholesale scenes are like gone.
So up to that point, 45 minutes in, it is teeing up now you have the clash between, Royalton's evil character, the pseudo comic book style Bond villain of sorts.
Sure.
And Speed and his family, the Racer family. So for the rest of the film, now they are at loggerheads of, that the Racer family has to figure out ways to overcome the corporate empire and all their money and things that they could throw at the film. Again, kind of tale as old as time, right?
Tale as old as time.
It's the story arc of, Speed overcoming his brother's legacy, coming into his own, figuring out a way to compete as the Royalton corporation has shut him out of racing now, and he's got to earn his way back in so that he can get to the top and go beat him in the Grand Prix of sorts.
Yep. Definitely don't need 90 minutes for that. That's like 15 minutes max to tell all of that. And that's exactly, like I said, why I had such a problem with this movie, because it's like, at that point, it just becomes tedious and repetitive and exhaustive. And it's like, I've seen all of this. I've seen everything that's here before. Like, even, again, I'm supposed to care about characters that aren't real characters. Like, that's the thing, you're trying to imbue a sense of drama with characters that literally only have one single emotion and are literal cartoon characters, and that works in the context of a cartoon, when you have a 22-minute Saturday morning cartoon, she's the cute one and he's the determined one and he's the badass guy and he's the caring parent and she's the whatever, so it's like, but man, dude, I tell you, like, There was just something that was so, again, like I never would have thought going into this that of all adjectives I would use tedious to describe this movie, but like I found myself like every 20 minutes like putting it on pause, and like it's like I'm at a party, like going into the bathroom, like, all right, Jason, you just got to get through this, right? Let's go. You can pump yourself up, bro. You got this, man. Just, you're strong. And like, so it was, and I know a lot of people don't feel that way, you know? I mean, again, I would have thought that I expected it to be somewhat shallow, you know, I expected it to be, but I know it's kind of been, reconsidered, and there's a lot of people that say that it didn't necessarily deserve its initial response. And so again, I came in thinking I was going to be Team Speed and Team Wachowskis and like rah this movie back. And so
I thought you would too.
I can sit here and talk about all the stuff that I didn't like about the film's aesthetic, you know, but when we talk about the visuals, the sound, the art direction, the acting style, etc., let me ask you, what did you like about the aesthetic, and what specifically, like, what do you think did the most heavy lifting?
Yeah, this was a question I had to ask myself several times going into this film. Like, so I was not expecting to like this film. Again, as I teed up earlier in the show, I heard this was a turd sandwich. So I was kind of going into this begrudgingly, like, okay, let's get this over with. I heard this was bad. And yet I just instantly was having the most fun right away from the classroom scene when he's sitting at his desk and then the world transforms, starts whipping by him. I'm like, oh, okay, it's this kind of movie. And, with the matte transitions, with the faces that go by or the fish that go by or whatever, all the mixed mediums, it really did kind of spark something in me that harkened back to the way I felt when I first saw the Spider-Man multiverse movies, Into the Multiverse, Across the Multiverse, and so on. Spider-Verse, excuse me.
Sure.
So it really felt like that. And I was just instantly having a great time. You've also got the score by Michael Giacchino, who I'm just in love with always, ever since The Incredibles, and even before that on Lost. I've just always loved his stuff, and this felt swanky and fun and zippy and moving right along. I thought that the bright, vibrant colors were really good, but as I really kind of asked myself what you're asking me, because we've all seen CGI before, and we've all seen these fun, lighthearted movies before. We've also seen brought to life animated, shows before to live action and so forth. So I think that what really stood out to me was the blending of the CGI with the live action. Now, in the past, when you've seen this done, I think of movies like Ready Player One, for example, that just didn't have the fun element. It was trying so hard to be real and bring the CGI into the real world that, it just felt kind of lifeless. And this almost felt like it brought the live action into the CGI world. It was a reverse kind of engineered deal in the same way that Scott Pilgrim did or Sin City did. That's why I referenced those movies earlier. Those movies succeeded to me for the same reason, that they were not trying to make all the grittiness come into Mickey Rourke's world. They were allowing Mickey Rourke in Sin City to go into that world and be cartoony and all of that. Same with Scott Pilgrim. When Michael Cera was, interacting as Scott Pilgrim with all these animated elements and all these CGI elements, it felt fun because he was going into that. And so in a very similar fashion, I think that they did a tremendous job with the balance between, 30% live action or 20% live action or less, and really leaning and bringing them into the fun CGI world without ever putting so much pressure on themselves to think, how could I make this feel real? Or, how do I make this feel gritty or dark or whatever? And it's worth mentioning, this film came out in 2008 at a time when that was a real big focus. And I also feel like that may be why the box office on this was so lackluster, because so much attention was going into, in this era of filmmaking, movies like Iron Man and The Dark Knight. It was all about, how do I take my comic books or what cartoons or whatever and make them and bring them into the real world and make them gritty and dark. How do I make it feel like this is happening in my backyard? And Speed Racer kind of threw all that out and said, this is a cartoon. Like, what the hell? I want to really go back and do that. And so, yeah.
Well, Lena, let's talk about the cartoon element, though, because there are a couple of things that I believe the film suffers from as a result of this steadfast commitment to making the live action cartoon.
Sure.
Which is that the end of the day, cartoons, back in Speed Racer days, late 70s, early 80s, are not what they are today. Today we've got
Late
Netflix
60s.
cartoons. Yeah, there you go. Even better. These were essentially, to a large degree, commercials for products, or they were just cynical cash grabs, right? They didn't have narrative development. You didn't have literal filmmakers making cartoons the way that we do these days, right? So it's easy to forget that, when we go back, there's not as much, again, as the point, substance in a lot of these cartoons. So when you try to bring that same element to a film in 2008, and you're going to do it for 2 hours and 15 minutes, I'm going to expect you to split that difference and say, okay, look, you're making 7 episodes of this cartoon and putting them together and screening them at once. I'm going to expect some sort of narrative through line, some sort of emotional, challenges that I can hang up on. The only one that was there was the Racer X thing, and I didn't care about that at all. The other thing was the relationship between Trixie and Speed, which again it's cartoonish and it's ridiculous. Like nobody doesn't know that they're getting together by the end of the movie, right?
I was starting to wonder.
Wonder what?
But on top of that, you have the fact that in a cartoon, because it's just an assemblage of scenes, and you're dealing with, small children that don't really have a sense of spatial awareness to the degree that we do as we get older and such, you can get away with not having physics and logistics and all of these things make sense, And look, we've talked about this before, right? It's kind of Star Wars rules. It's like, you can have magic and witchcraft and the Force and people flying and regenerate your limbs. And like, you can do anything you want in a movie, right? Or a story of any sort. But as an audience, the one thing that I expect you to do is to clearly define the rules of this world so that I can understand what happens within it, right?
Yes.
I feel like you know why these things are happening, but me as the audience member, no clue. And I'm somebody that didn't watch the show, so I don't have that knowledge coming into it.
Right.
Hopefully that's not a prerequisite. We've talked about that before. So, so it's the fact that like, first of all, I just had a huge fact with the fact that like none of the physics and just what this world is with regards to the racetracks and everything else was established.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I want to mention, though, is as far as the CGI is concerned. OK, now, when you say CGI, I think that like, yes, we're talking about the actual graphics behind that. Right. But I think to a large degree, what we're also talking about is specifically the art direction. OK, and that's a huge part of the visual aesthetic. Right. Because there's the CGI, the actual bringing to life of these different elements. But then there's the visual and artistic direction. Right. The Wachowskis and all the visual designers coming in and saying, what do we want this to look like with regards, to the instructions that we're going to give our animators, and tell them what to bring to life. And I think this is, again, one of the biggest issues that I had with this film, because look, I love color. I love bright colors and overly saturated colors, and like, that's not a problem, right? But there's one thing that I don't like stylistically, and that is kitsch. I am not a kitschy man, sir. I am not a Florida Palm Beach guy. I am not a California Palm Springs guy. I don't like pink flamingos and pastel houses and neon road signs. And like, I do like neon, right? But like, just that whole, like, this movie felt like John Waters on amphetamines, right? Just with regards to.
So it felt like John Waters.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I feel like he's also done his fair share. So like, yeah, this is just a Saturday for him, right? But, this film it was almost like drag queen brunch at Palm Springs or something like that. Like, it was just so over the top and loud and just in your face with regards to how kitschy it was. And it's like, look, dude, I don't even necessarily hate that world. Like,
and that's fair.
And I will say the CGI was like so bombastic, and there was, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but there was just something about it where as I was watching, like, I couldn't help feel that they were in the same world as like the aliens from that Eiffel 65 Blue music video, if you remember that one. I'm blue, I don't know why, like, it's just as I was watching, I thought of that, right? But it's like, so again, dude, it's like they're laying it on so thick, and it's just like,
they are.
It's so much. And so again, it's kind of like, it's like someone just being like super in your face. Like, if I love that thing, then like, great, like, awesome,
Sure.
cool, yeah, dude, like, get up in my face, but if I'm not into what you're doing and I kind of just want to be left on the sidelines, and you're the guy who's like, hey dude, come on and join us here, and I'm like, just please leave me alone. I respect that you got your thing going on, you guys are having a great time, this just like isn't for me. And so
Yeah.
it's the specific kitschiness of everything that just like really, like, yeah, it was unpalatable for me, shall we say. But it doesn't sound like it bothered you.
Are you done? Do you feel better now?
I'm very glad that I got that up.
This has been Therapy Sesh with Jason and Ryan. Yeah, look, you're giving me a lot to unpack in your 10-minute monologue, but if I was going to retort a couple
Just
things
went on
here.
a 12-minute monologue to start the show and you're giving me shit? Okay.
I will break this down in a few different ways and a couple subsets. So, yes, you're absolutely right. I think in your first act of your monologue, you were talking about the cartoon element and how this is a live action cartoon. So, and a lot of times that didn't work for you. I would use examples also at times that it probably going back to watch these things wouldn't work for me either. It's like the Flintstones, remember? And also starring John Goodman, for example, which I thought was odd. That man loves a good 60s cartoon live action remake. So, yeah, he did the Flintstones, which I think is fun, probably high level, probably doesn't deserve to be on a show like this, dissected. I think you watch it with your kids and you're like, oh, that was cute. They did a pretty good job with that, with the dinosaurs and the whole thing and Mr. Slate. But, are you going to like go and talk about it on a video podcast and break it down? Probably not. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, maybe, the live action, dark, gritty, a lot of fun. I really enjoyed I do think that one may hold up even in my older age, going back to watch some of that stuff. But still, doing a lot of cartoon humor, a lot of silly stuff going on there. They're turtles, and once I see them do karate and you set up the shredder, like what's the rest of the movie? It's like, well, they just fight a bunch of bad guys and do their karate stuff. Well, we've already seen them eat pizza. Well, they're going to eat pizza 5 more times. Okay.
Kids.
I get it. I will also say that if you're not into the neon-soaked, very, very vibrant colors of this film, man, they're not going to leave you a whole lot to hang your hat on. Because, for example, with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, it's a lot of, Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, all their interactions, everything that's going on with that, Culkin, all this stuff. But then, you get those animated moments, but then they always come back to the real-ish world. So you always kind of get a break from that. Even in the Spider-Verse animated films, same thing. You're going to go into these other multiverse areas, and they're going to be all these different mediums of art. Some of them are very comic booky. Some of them have like a different layered effect. But then you always come back to that original style of animation, so that as long as you're in it for that, then, they give you a breather from some of these multiversal medium types. This, you get no breaks. So if this is not your thing and you're just high level, I don't like bright, vibrant colors. I like the gritty. I like the Iron Mans and the Dark Knights of the world, and that's where I want to live. This is not Shawshank Redemption, I would even argue this is not WALL-E or this is very, very much its own aesthetic, and it leans into it heavy. Now for me, I really enjoyed it. I liked the bright, vibrant colors. I thought it was very unique. I had not seen anything done this way, at least not in a very long time that I could think of off the dome. So, watching this, I was just enamored by the originality of it, if nothing else, that it was so unique in what it was trying to do. And I would hope that you could appreciate that whether or not this is your thing, I would hope that you could at least look at it and say, for its time, they did it pretty well. Like, I think that the seamless blending of it, the transitions, the fun of it all, the over-the-top hammy performances, again, in a very Flintstones, Viva Rock Vegas kind of way, they did it, to the utmost, big budget, and I think that they knocked it out of the park for what they were trying to do. Now, if that's not what you're trying to, if you don't like baseball, or if you don't like, racing or NASCAR or whatever, then, that's not your thing. But you could at least look at that and be like, well, the Dodgers are pretty good this year. I don't give a shit, but, good for them.
Sure. So let me ask you, Ryan, you know me pretty well. Are bright, vivid colors my thing?
Sometimes, yeah. We just talked about Suspiria
yes,
a few weeks ago.
Thing. Exactly. Yeah. So that's
so what's the deal? You just said you don't like kitsch.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I don't like kitsch, but I love bright, vibrant colors. So you're telling me Suspiria is kitschy?
You're telling me that Suspiria doesn't have bright, vibrant colors. This has bright, vibrant colors. You like colors. This gives you colors.
That's exactly my point. So obviously, for me to not like this film, there's more to it than just not liking colors, because I love bright, vibrant colors. I love hyperkinetic vibes, right? I love animation. I love anime. I love all of the things, right? And the one thing that this film is, the biggest sin that it commits, is it's boring. This is a boring film.
That's where I will fight you.
Big whoop. Want to fight about it?
No,
I will 100%.
Fight you, sir. This movie is so tedious and boring. Like, again, every 20 minutes, I had to pump myself up. All right, dude, another 20 minutes of this boring-ass movie, but, like, let's go and just get yourself 20 minutes through, and then you could take a break, go walk around, get some food, get some drink, whatever. So, and that's the thing, because, again, like, there is zero substance. So once you reveal all of your tricks by the 45-minute mark, and then you're just rinse and repeat, there's nothing here for me. There is absolutely nothing here left for me, you know?
Sure.
So now I will say there are a couple things that I did appreciate about it, but and none more so than little Paulie Litt, man. So I got to say, dude, the little brother was the absolute best part of this entire film for me. I thought that he was a great comic relief. I thought that he crushed it. I thought that he got most of the fun moments. And I also feel like as they were cutting this film, the Wachowskis, they kind of recognized this, because this guy got a lot of screen time. And he really shouldn't have. Like, he doesn't play any important part in anything that's going on. He's just a guy that, like, comes up and, like, does the white crack or, like, gets into the silly scenes. So, like, the moments with him were fun. But again, like, it's not grounded into anything else that's, like, going on as far as the actual film. And then, to me, again, because I'm just so, like, just bored and just waiting for this film to end, like, he would come on and it would be like, oh, cool, we're having some fun for a minute. And then he'd go away and be like, oh, Paulie's gone. And then I got to watch the movie again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, but I will say, you know, you mentioned this kind of at the top of the show, and I do agree. Like, one of the things that also just didn't work for me was the fact that, it did feel like Emile Hirsch was in a very different movie than everyone else. And I will say, like, Emile Hirsch, his acting was good. Like, he did a good job with what he was trying to do. And this is why I kind of get back to that. Like, I feel like directorially, the Wachowskis only allowed everybody to express, like, one singular emotion. And so, you know, he was like morose, you know, serious, whatever it was. And so, you know, everybody else is like, you know, they're giving themselves the bright anime eyes, and, you know, they're loud and they're very big. And then, like, Emile Hirsch walks in with his, like, Robert De Niro act and is just, like, very like, you know, and then fine, you know, like, again, it's not a bad performance, but it felt like he was in a different movie. Like, it felt like, you know, and so to then see that, and then as far as the rest of the ensemble, like, most of them kind of felt to me like they didn't really want to be there. Like, I felt like John Goodman slept through his role. I felt like Susan Sarandon and Christina Ricci were just, like, there to, you know, again, flash their big bright anime eyes, which are very lovely. Don't get me wrong.
I feel like Emile Hirsch, and then even, like, if there was a branch out in the tree of this thing, or the, you know, a Venn diagram, if you will, the overlap, Emile Hirsch existed way more, was trying to split the difference between the Racer X, you know, Rex subplot, which was very darker. You had all the crime lords, you know, some darker things happening there. Racer X was on this, like, you know, crazy, you know, undercover police mission or something. He's, like, working for the government to try to bring these people down or something like that. So there's this whole crime syndicate thing that's like, you know, if Martin Scorsese was making the Flintstones. But then you also have the other side of it, which, to your point, was all bright and cheery and, you know, the blinky eyes and all of that, you know. And so there's that side of it. And Emile Hirsch was trying his damn best to split the difference. And that's a really hard thing to do. But in 90% of the film, it seemed like he was existing way more in that serious side of the film with the Racer X and the gangsters and all of that. With that said, going back to kind of some of your other points that you're scattering on, I'm trying to pick up the pieces here and defend myself. It sounds to me, and I think this is the overarching thing that we're getting to the bottom of here, because in doing research for this, I've gone back and watched quite a bit of the episodes of Speed Racer, the old animated series from the 60s. It was only on for 2 years. It was like 67 and 68. Here we go.
This is for old Jason, dude. If you're going to tell me that you enjoyed those, then that might help explain things. Because those were rough as hell, dude.
We are getting into the meat of it here, because this was a hyperkinetic, super CGI, crazy, over the top psychedelic version of those things. For example, in those shows, you had Trixie randomly showing up at her helicopter. That was kind of her place. In the later episodes, she starts to race. She shows up in the race cars and she starts subbing in. So, to have her show up in that helicopter, fans of the show are going to watch that and be like, hey, they're doing the thing. She's in the helicopter. That's fantastic. She's calling the shots. She's talking to Speed. She's helping announce the thing. That's awesome. But for you, not being a fan of the show or even familiar with it at that point, you're saying, where the fuck did this helicopter come from? Which is totally understandable and respectable, and I can relate to that. Again, going back to the Flintstones. If you're like, what the hell? Why is this guy so gruff? Is he misogynist? He's talking to his wife. He's doing the house chores. You got dinosaur with. This is stupid. I don't even like Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners, which is all Flintstones is a prehistoric animated Honeymooners. So, if you don't like that, then you're definitely not going to like the live action Flintstones. You're like, this is lame.
But also
he's like working at a rock quarry and then now he's here and doing this and that. That's a
perfect example, because that movie was horribly received critically. And that's the thing, is that people love these properties. These movies aren't being panned because people don't like these properties. These movies aren't being made because people don't like these properties. It's the exact opposite. People love these things and then they get their live action version and it's crap and they're crushed.
But I'm saying you did not like this property.
No,
so if you did not like this property,
you're
definitely not going to like this movie that's trying its hardest to be an adaptation of that property. So I think that you're never going to overcome that. I could sit here till I'm blue in the face and talk about all the cool, fun, splashy things, the fondant on the cake, if you will, fondant on the cake, all the icing and all this fun stuff. None of that is going to mean shit to you because you don't like the original property, of which that's the core of this thing.
Well, I don't think so. So here's where I would say that that's probably incorrect, because this movie was released in 2008. Tell me again when the anime was broadcast.
I believe it was 67, 68.
Okay, so 40 years. So are you telling me that this movie was made for 48-year-olds?
That's another thing we got to talk about. And I can get into that very quickly if you want.
Because this movie, so what I'm saying is this movie is made for children in 2008. So if you're telling me that a prerequisite for enjoying this film is being familiar with a property from 1968, then now what you're telling me is the Wachowskis have made a movie for 8-year-olds, but really for 50-year-olds. They've made an 8-year-olds program for 50-year-old people. How do you resolve those two things?
Well, again, I would go back to my Flintstones example. Are you supposed to be familiar with the Flintstones cartoon when you see Fred Flintstone slide down the back of the dinosaur when he gets off and he like toots the horn and he checks out and he's like, yabba dabba doo. It's like, what does yabba dabba doo mean? It's like, I gotta watch the Flintstones now?
That's a good question.
I gotta know about the Flintstones cartoon? What the yabba dabba doo? What does that even mean? That's stupid. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this. When did the Flintstones come out? 65, 66? What are they making a show for fucking 75-year-olds? And it's like all kid stuff, but it's like, so I get it.
Are you good?
I'm not saying that you're supposed to.
I still have a question for you. Are you good?
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Okay. Did you enjoy your minute-long little impression?
It's impression of you, buddy. Go on.
So here's my point: is when the Flintstones film came out in the 90s, was it a prerequisite that you had to enjoy the cartoon to go into the movie?
I think that they were expecting you to know the cartoon. Yeah, they were banking on the fact that it was such a popular franchise that fans of the cartoon would come in droves to see a live action version of this.
So you believe that the studio made the Flintstones movie with the intent of not having children show up to watch it? Like, it was not made for children, is what you're saying. The Flintstones movie was made for adults. Is that that's what you're telling me, right?
It's a valid question, man. I don't think a lot of people liked that movie either. I think
that's exactly what I'm asking, because it's a perfect point. Because if you're saying that these remakes are made for adults and you have to be familiar with that property, then why wouldn't you make them more appealing to adults? Why would you make them so child-oriented And furthermore, as a studio, why would you greenlight making a kids film for 40-year-old men and women?
Right. I can't defend that. And furthermore, in one of my opening statements, I actually agreed with you, and I will continue to agree with you that this feels very, if this film is flawed in some major way to me, especially narratively, it's that who is this movie for? I think I proposed that question at the top of the show, where it's like, at times it feels like it's for kids, at times it feels like it's for adults, at times they're making adult humor, but then it goes to slapstick. So tonally, I think it is all over the place. And so structurally and narratively, I do see a lot of flaws in that regard. Right now, currently, as we speak, they are working on another Popeye live action animation. How is that going to go? For a lot of the same reasons, because I agree with you. Like, are you making the Popeye the Sailor Man? What is that? Came out in the 50s? Like,
but that's not what you just went. You literally just went on a minute tangent making fun of me for suggesting that you should be able to enjoy the Flintstones without knowing the Flintstones. And now you're saying, what? They're going to make Popeye for people that don't know Popeye? That's ridiculous.
But you can't fault. I'm looking at it from the reverse angle, in that you cannot fault the Wachowskis for saying we're going to pepper things in from the source material for fans of the source material.
Okay, so that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, if you want to pepper things in, that's great. As a matter of fact, right now, as I'm recording this, I'm watching Fallout, and Fallout does a fantastic job of that, right? That's what I think Speed Racer should have done. I think Speed Racer should have worked as a film and then incorporated all of these callbacks to the anime for fans. But again, we've talked about this, right? Like in your Dune review for the audio podcast before we were doing the video thing, you were critical because a large part of that movie's success, well, the movie works in and of itself, but it really works to its utmost degree only if you've read the books and you can fill in some of these gaps that they didn't have time to, right? And you were rightly critical of that. And we talked about that. And I acknowledged that in our own discussions, right? Like, yeah, you know what? Like, if you're going to make a movie, don't then assign people homework and say, well, you have to check this out coming into it. This is why I'm hugely critical of the Marvel movies, right? Because I don't want to watch 7 goddamn television shows to be able to understand what's going on in this movie, right? That's fair. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get a sense of, is like, on the one hand, it sounds like you're saying that, like, well, you didn't know the source material, so why should you enjoy this movie? But then on the other hand, you're saying, well, yeah, a movie should be made to where you can enjoy it for what it is without knowing the source material. And so I'm just trying to figure out where on the spectrum this falls.
Well, all I'm going to, we could button this up and move on to the next topic, but all I'm saying is you can't be mad when the source material is infused into the movie. Now, for example, Trixie and the helicopter, or Trixie racing, or, the different things that the car does with the buttons on the steering wheel, stuff like that. The way Spriddle shows up with Chim Chim, interacts comedically and then pieces out. These are all elements of, and even the Racer X Rex subplot. These are all things from the source material that I don't think you needed to know to watch this or enjoy this. But if you're asking why they're there, that's the question I thought you were proposing, and I apologize if I misunderstood. But if you're asking why is this there, why did they do all these things? It's because it's in the source material. I don't think you need to be a fan of the source material to appreciate that Trixie's in a helicopter. She's just in a helicopter now. It's a cartoon. But if you do know that was her shtick, for fans of the show, there it is.
Well, we've obviously debated this a little bit, and I think it's a perfect time to go ahead and bring in a third party to help us analyze this film. That's right. For the first time on this show, we actually have brought in a guest, and this is a pre-recorded interview that we're going to go ahead and cut to. Let's go ahead and check it out here. Our guest today is a gentleman who has worked in the film industry for over 20 years for some hugely influential companies like FX, Netflix, HBO. He counts among his credits The Bourne Legacy, Outer Banks, and Snowfall, among many others. And look, this guy is awesome. He does it all. DIT, color grading, all manner of post-production. We are so happy to introduce our very first guest on the video version of Esoterica Cinema. Please welcome Mr. Tyson Bierrman.
Thank you, Tyson. Appreciate you joining us today.
Hey. Hey, guys. Oh, I have to do
man, how's it going?
Oh, wait. What's up, Jason and Ryan? Can I do that?
There we go.
Some sort of.
Yes.
Am I?
And then I'll play Ryan. How's it going, buddy?
Appreciate you that commitment to the bit.
How you doing, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tyson, man, we're super excited to have you here because, a lot of your expertise is kind of within the like visual realm of filmmaking, as opposed to maybe say Ryan, who's more of like an audio guy. A lot of the questions that we have for you today are going to be like a little bit more visually oriented, perhaps, than maybe some story or audio. So just going to go ahead and jump right in here and looking forward to what you have to bring to the table with some of your insight. Now, my first question for you, Tyson, the film embraces an aesthetic of hyperrealism. Like we've been talking about this for a minute now. Did this visual theme work for you? And if so, what elements do you feel stood out to you most positively or negatively, depending on what your position is?
Hyperrealism to me is like something that's realistic in an art form. So like a pencil drawing that makes you feel like you're looking at a real thing and kind of trying to figure out if it's real or not. To a certain extent, I understand the hyperness, but the realism is actually the opposite, in my opinion, on this movie. The Wachowskis, obviously known for visual effects, and have this background that they're magicians in their minds where they can create something that doesn't exist in the real world and bring it to life on screen. In a way, I think this film went the opposite direction and almost called out the visual effects, made sure that you saw them as visual effects. Because, I mean, this was 2008, right? So it wasn't like VFX were hard to make real. This was, post Iron Man, right? Iron Man, which a suit was completely made of CG elements. So we had that ability to make something look photorealistic. In this movie, I feel like they just went the absolute opposite direction. So much so that even during the places when there wasn't any CG, like in their house, and obviously this was a stage-built set with vibrant color background. The color palette was all over the place and fantastic, really. But they even backlit the characters from all sides to almost separate them from the background like you would on a green screen. And it's almost like they tried to make the real sets look like green screen. Which I kind of.
So you're saying like even in those instances where there wasn't green screens, they still shot it like it was shot against a green screen just to give it that look.
Yeah, I feel like that was intentional. Like the DP was like, well, all right, we're embracing this. I mean, obviously there's crazy scenes where there's no chance that the audience is thinking this is really happening or there's practical, sets. But this is also post. We had the 300 and Sin City. And things like that. So I think they were kind of leaning into that world where it was this, if you want to say hyper realism, but just hyper intense, maybe ultra intense colors, lights, everything was just so vibrant. And even the tracking on the driving stuff, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel connected. It felt like an old Hitchcock film half the time. And I liked it. In the fact that they embraced the suck, so to speak. They're just like, we can, but we know the Wachowskis and their VFX team have the ability to make this incredibly well-tracked thing. I mean, they did The Matrix already at this point. So to a certain extent, they were the pioneers. The fact that they just kind of said, nah, screw it. Let's just make it look like a crazy cartoon. Of course, it's a cartoon media to begin with. So I think it works. I think the craziness of the VFX is pushed to an extent where we're not even trying to hide that it's VFX.
Do you think it holds up?
And I think that's fun.
Do you think it you think it's held up over time? Because we're going back to the dawn of the digital age. So,
I mean, yes and no, but that's the thing. We're going back to the dawn, not even the dawn, like, see, so this was 2008. The first film to get professionally, like digitally color corrected was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And that was 8 years prior. So we had been well into the digital color correction age at that point. And we also have a DP on this that shot Phantom Menace and a bunch
David
of other
Tattersall.
things.
We were talking about him earlier.
Exactly. And he is obviously knows how to work with visual effects. And again, to a certain extent, I think it was probably him. I I can't imagine the Wachowskis were like, let's make this decision to backlight everybody and do this thing. But I'm sure Tattersall kind of suggested it, and he said, what do you think? They're like, we love it.
Right.
That's usually how it works on
I
set.
don't know. I can see them kind of working together, though. You know, I think like,
Oh, for sure.
I think the Wachowskis had a very specific vision. And I think that maybe if they weren't coming up with the specific techniques, I think they definitely wanted that and worked with him to try to achieve that, because that's like the one thing that I'll say. So, you know, you haven't really been here for this discussion up to this point, right? But right now, like Ryan is team Speed Racer. I had a lot of problems with the film. I didn't really care for it as much. But the one thing that I'll say is like, I'm not going to say that the Wachowskis did not care about this film. Like they absolutely did. Like they put everything they had and then 112% more into it. So they definitely tried. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this ideation came from them and then the team just kind of tried to execute it, you know?
Well, for me, that answer that question of team Speed Racer pro or against the whole, I think if you made this film, like more of a recent film that's in the racing world with a lot of VFX was Gran Turismo. The Sony, They made a film about the video game, very drivey, but it was made to be real, you know? And to a certain extent, it calls out some of the cheesiness in the script. And I'm not going to go into, that's not the film we're talking about. But I feel like going into that cartoon realm, back to that same thing, that intentionally cartoony, intentionally VFX heavy, the story itself can be a little less serious or even complete in a lot of ways. Definitely, I feel like there's a lot of phoned in finishing on some of the, is it his brother?
You're Rex, aren't you? You mean your brother?
You know, that kind of stuff. Very over the top. But, and the editing of that in the you know, the moving and crossing the floor, it felt very like Dick Tracy. Remember the old movie Dick Tracy?
We actually guest hosted on a
Fantastic.
podcast about that movie on Cheap Seat Reviews.
See,
that was so bananas.
And that's a classic in a lot of ways. Were the performances in Dick Tracy great? No, they were cartoonish, big performances over the top. But that's what the film called for. And I think this went the same direction. I think for the most part, they did a good job of kind of sticking to the material and delivering it the way it needed to be delivered to be.
Hell yeah, brother. Team Speed Racer all the way.
Yeah, man. I gotta say, I enjoyed it. I'd say my wife enjoyed it, but I don't know. She fell asleep halfway through somehow. I think she just had like an
I was going to say, did you check for a pulse?
Lights and just, yeah, no, I did.
Nice.
I did.
No, but honestly, like there's something about this movie. I'm telling you, I feel like this movie either works for you or it doesn't. Because I was saying the same thing. It's like, I of all emotions to this film, I did not expect to be bored halfway through, and somehow I got bored halfway through. And I think we were talking about it. I think it's because I maybe wasn't invested in the characters. Also, I didn't understand a lot of just like the logistics of the racetrack. Like it just seemed like it was just a lot of scenes coming at you, right?
They did not try to explain
So it's hard to
the race
follow.
world of that. It's like if Rainbow Road from Mario Kart became a real event.
100%.
Yeah, and
100%.
Which, by the way, I almost don't want anyone to hear that, because if somebody wants to make Rainbow Road or Mario Kart the movie, this is Mario Kart the movie. Look, Wachowskis,
yeah, right.
If you're listening, because obviously you are, how about we make Mario
Fans
Kart
of the show, we
movie,
know.
and we do it in this? That'll be fantastic.
That's hilarious, man. All right, well, so it sounds like. I mean, it sounds like you like the film. You're definitely Team Ryan, but also maybe a little bit more critical than he might have been about some of these things.
Yeah.
So you know,
I'll
take a little bit
though,
of that.
Jason.
I feel like I've got a little bit on Team Jason, so I'm just gonna take what I can in here.
Sometimes some of the most terrible films are more fun to watch because you're not thinking of them as a film. I think working in the film industry to a certain extent, there's like a level of greatness that you have to get to turn your brain off, or a level of terrible you have to get to turn your brain off. And
yeah, definitely.
There's that middle road where it's kind of hard to enjoy it because you're like, they're trying to do this, but they're failing. So when you see something that's, you know, so bad that you're just like, oh, okay, let's just watch it. It's 5 minutes in. If you start criticizing, you're going to you might as well just turn it off. So if you're going to finish it, just turn your brain off and watch it.
Yeah.
This wasn't that, but this was definitely fun to watch.
Tyson, you ever heard of a film called Dagon?
No. Do I need to?
Oh man.
Yes, you do, sir.
As I
love
watch
that
you
movie. That's
guys-
from our.
As I watch your show, I get introduced to a lot of films, and I watch some of them all the way through.
Oh, we're sorry.
And I watch very few of them. A couple of them I watch a few minutes, and I'm like, nope, this one's not me.
Yep.
So Dagon is from director Stuart
Yeah, this
Gordon, who infamously made
our boy Stuart G.
And yeah, Jason is now.
Okay.
And who Ryan famously does like a Chicago guy. This is his Stewie G. Even though Stuart
He
Gordon
sounds
sounds
nothing like
nothing
that.
like this. He always
Yeah.
does them like
Well,
this.
I mean, he's horny. What can I say? He's
Although,
very horny,
wait.
and he makes some horny ass movies. Jason is now the proud owner of the Dagon Collector's Edition box set. So
2 discs, baby.
Well, we talk about that. You saying that in that voice and in that accent. One of the things that stood out to me is the little brother, who's the little kid who's got
Yes,
the monkey.
I love the little
Where is
brother.
he from,
As
though?
much as I
Like the
I don't
entire
know.
family sounds like they're from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and then he's straight out of Brooklyn. Like he works in a deli. Hey, Dad, what's going on? It's like,
Yeah.
is he even part of? Is he adopted? I don't know. Does the
I think they instructed him to act like a newsie. They're like act and speak like a newsie. He's like, yeah, no problem.
exactly? I was 100% thinking Newsies the entire time. I'm like, is Christian Bale his
Yes,
dialogue
Mr.
coach?
Papers?
oh man, yeah. Hey, look, I got a monkey. Big deal. You want to fight about it?
Big whoop. Want to fight about it?
Yeah, you want to do something about it?
But I will say, dude, I loved that kid, man. For as much as I didn't care for the movie, I feel like that kid was like so good. And I feel like the other, like the filmmakers knew it because he had an inordinate amount of screen time. Like he should not have been in the movie nearly as much as he was. But they're like, hey, he's funny. Just throw him on again.
But he had a monkey. I mean,
And he had a monkey.
You-
Exactly.
You got a monkey. Actually, I watched it on Amazon, and I paused it during one of the scenes, and it was a monkey scene. And you know how when you pause something on Amazon, the actors come up on the bottom, and there are 2 monkeys that came up, and I was like, I want to know why there's 2 monkeys. Is it because there's rules on set, or did something happen to a monkey? I don't want to take it there. I don't want to know, actually.
Man.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope it was the primate equivalent of like a Mary-Kate Ashley Olsen thing. They were just monkey twins. They
You
were
can't
both
have a monkey.
talented.
The monkey has to go to school for half the day. Has to go to primate
exactly.
school.
They're swapping out for each other, taking each other's tests because
Yeah.
one's the smart one, right? Like,
They literally had him flinging poo at people as his like
Yeah.
superpower.
Oh wow, yeah.
Come on.
That one stood out. I was like, they
you
didn't
got a
just
monkey.
really do that, did they? And sure as shit,
yeah, no.
they totally did.
hey,
They did.
I told you
Oh,
Ryan loves a good pun. Nothing more than a good
yeah,
pun from this man.
absolutely.
So listen, man, this conversation's been a lot of fun. Before you go, did want to ask, is there anything else that really stood out to you about the film that you either just want to bring up or want to make mention of here before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be brief about this. The color grading in this film, and I've got a lot of background in color grading, obviously super vibrant, but you also have to take it into account of the technology of the time. And I can go into the camera, the F-23, which I worked with a lot, which is literally a camera that's an HD camera that shoots onto an HD like tape, like a physical tape. The color depth isn't extraordinary. So the elements that they were color grading and the places they were sending it to, because you had a theater situation that was half film and half digital at that point. You had the standards were all over the place. The home video market, they pushed color space about as far as it could go in every direction, to the point where I'm sure they had some compatibility issues in some theaters and had to do like multiple passes for film and then multiple passes for the digital projection and then home video. Color grading in this film was incredibly complicated, and I haven't been able to find a lot of background to that because color grading at the time wasn't a discussed thing. But you watch this thing and you know, if you're familiar with a vector scope, which is essentially just the circle that when your color leaves that circle in this digital representation, it's too much for a display to handle. That thing was just stretched right to the edge the whole time.
Riding the line.
And they had an HD camera, which to me, everybody says, oh, it's got to be 4K, it's got to be this. I don't think anybody can watch this film and think that it was low fidelity, you know? So it kind of lets you know, like, okay, K isn't everything. Color can be a lot. And pushing the envelope with professionals that can actually get the most out of a medium is the difference between working and not working in this quality that we talk about. So, and I think this film did that brilliantly. They pushed every envelope about as far as it could go, including believable script, and still somehow pulled it off. So, yeah, Team Ryan.
Appreciate
team
you, buddy.
Speed Racer.
Yeah.
hey, I'm here for you.
I'll get you next time, Gadget.
Real quick, I have one quick follow-up. Just high level, did you have fun watching the movie? Were you smiling, or were you like dredging through this? Kind of like, was it a slog for you, or were you like, oh, this is a lot of fun? Was it a good popcorn film for you?
I never smiled. Here's the
Pregnant
thing.
pause,
I never
then.
smiled with the film. I smiled at the film a lot. Very few times did I smile with the film. But it was
We're laughing at you. We're not laughing with you. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. Was it? But I think it was also in on its own joke enough to be okay.
We'll give you a chance as a first-time guest here. Thank you for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time. If you were going to give this a star rating, what would you give it out of 5 stars?
Ooh, out of 5 stars. Let's just go with a nice even 3.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Splitting
I'm not
that
going to
difference.
say. I'm not going to go and recommend it to anybody, and I probably wouldn't watch it again for the 3rd time. But I also didn't. I didn't feel like I wasted my time. So you know.
There you go.
Well, then I guess we can have you back on again. That's a good enough answer.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Splitting the difference between the two of us. Not offending either of us too much to make sure that he gets back
I'm right
on.
in the middle.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here
Well
for.
played, sir. Well played.
I'm that 3rd judge, so that when you can go to commercial break, they're like, "Ooh, I wonder what the actual opinion will be across the 3."
Yeah. Securing that 2-1 majority. So well done. Well, listen, Tyson, it's been great having you on, man. We really appreciate you working with us, being our first guest on the show. Now, before we leave, I did want to go ahead and let people know that you actually yourself have a podcast in development. And it sounds really interesting. From what I understand, you're going to talk to different industry insiders about sort of the state of the industry as it relates to innovations in the field of technologies, how those technologies are affecting filmmaking in the present and in the future. And what is the name of that show?
Infinite Focus.
Infinite Focus.
Play on the lens, the focus of your lens. Just excited to.
Very nice.
I feel like there's a ton of podcasts out there that are, or YouTube channels that are about the technology, but it's like, hey, look at the new camera from Sony. But there's so many things that are the same in all of this technology. How a digital sensor work? What is color space? And all these things. That I think there's a market for it. We're in this age where people have these things all over the place, and I think it's going to be fun to discuss it with the professionals that can explain it better than I can.
Excellent. Yeah, well, we are definitely looking forward to that. Once again, that show is called Infinite Focus with our man Tyson Bierrman. Tyson, we will let you go. Thanks so much for showing up, man, and hopefully we'll have you back on sometime soon.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right, some great content there from our now friend of the show, Tyson Bierrman. Wouldn't you say, Ryan?
I think so.
We've obviously talked a lot, gone back and forth about a lot of the different elements, gotten a number of different viewpoints here. Let's go ahead and wrap up this review with our final thoughts. And I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here this time. So look, for me, I have to ask myself how such a vivid and hyperkinetic film can be, above all responses, boring, right? That's the last thing I expected. And I think it suffers from 2 primary points of note. The first is the lack of believable, empathetic characters, right? They're not even really interesting. And there's also this huge lack of logistical discipline within the races. So when all of this comes together and you have this narrative structure that's just utter chaos, it's hard for me to give a crap about anything on hand, because in summation, this film just felt like a rambling 2-hour and 15-minute story from a 3-year-old that's just learning how to talk but can't exactly get all of their thoughts in a row. And it's like, and then we're over here, and then Speed was a kid, and then, oh, but he got this like crayon stuff, but then like we go forward and now he's on Rainbow Road, and then, oh, but there's also this girl Trixie, and like she sometimes races, but then she's also sometimes in a helicopter and they like each other. But oh my God, there's also this little brother with the chip, and I'm just like, oh, dude, you're gonna ask me to sit through 2 hours and 15 minutes of this onslaught of information that's just like coming at me with no rhyme or reason or anchoring. And you throw that in with a bloated runtime, and it was just really, really frustrating. Bad time at the movies for old Jason. Ryan, I know you felt differently. Why don't you tell us your response?
Well, Jason, from my perspective, I think it's appropriate that this is a film about racing, because in the sport of racing, you have some people that see it as a petrol-soaked adrenaline ride, and others that can't see past it just being cars driving around in a circle for hours. I find myself in the former camp for this one. It does have its flaws, I get it. And I'll admit those flaws are impossible to defend on a show like this. But in that moment where it's just me and my theater, basking in the neon flickering lights, I have a stupid grin ear to ear, and the entire time, on paper, I probably shouldn't have liked this film. I get it. I should be on Team Jason, but I really did enjoy this film way more than I should have. It does seem to succeed despite itself. In a lot of the same ways that I didn't like the first Transformers live action film or Ready Player One. I really love the book Ready Player One. Transformers is another good comparison because, again, that was directly lifted from an 80s cartoon. And to me, it did not translate very well. The plot, I didn't give a shit about anything. And whenever the robots would clash, it was just a meld of metal. I couldn't tell who was what or what was going on. So I get your plight. I really do. This particular one happened to work for me. But hey, Transformers didn't have a bloodthirsty tank of piranhas or a sugar-rushed chimp in a lab coat. So I'm going along with this one. This one worked for me.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our show here with our 3 adjectives and star rating feature, as we always do. Before we leave, we would like to remind you, go ahead, like, subscribe, follow, whether you're on the podcast or the video program. We certainly do appreciate you. And again, let us know what you thought. This is obviously a divisive film. Me and Ryan got into it, got a little heated at times, went to bat for our positions. And, at the end of the day, I think we at least have a strong understanding of why we feel that way. And we would love to know why you feel the way that you do about this film as well. Now, Ryan, we always finish up with 3 adjectives. Please go ahead and let our audience know what that is real quick before you give us yours.
Well, 3 adjectives are, if you had just gotten out of the movie theater and you had to summarize this in just a brief little phrase or a few words, what would those be? And mine are breakneck pacing, because of course this film has breakneck editing. The next 2 are an homage to 90s band The Offspring. I'm going to say keep them separated, because I feel like there are 2 different movies here, and I think they could have done a little better job of joining them. But the other side of the compliment sandwich, as Jason likes to say, is come out and play, because I think this is a fun movie. And Jason doesn't know this, but I'm holding up a prop here, my very own copy of the Speed Racer Blu-ray. I cannot wait to watch this many more times in my life, get into all the special features. Love my Speed Racer, buddy. How about you?
That's fine. You know what, dude? You have your Speed Racer Blu-ray. I have my 2-disc collector's edition Dagon Blu-ray, and we'll both just be happy with those on our respective
sides. That's totally
sides.
Fine. To each their own. Yes.
My 3 adjectives: incessantly hyperactive, just would not stop coming at you a mile a minute. By the way, if anybody wants to die of alcohol poisoning, play a game where you take a drink every time there's a matte transition on screen. You will absolutely not survive the night. You will not survive any longer.
No, you will not.
That will be the end of your days.
You will not. Yes.
Relentless.
You will be like Spriddle and Chim Chim on the candy, just all over the floor, fucked up.
You will be like me watching this movie. You'll be like, what happened the last 40 minutes? I know I was here. I just don't know what happened. Time traveling over here. Relentlessly unfocused. Same thing. Just a little kid just, and you're like, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't care. Just please wrap up your story. And exhaustively tedious, man. Again, just such a slug. And again, is the weirdest thing. Like, I would have thought with all those colors and all of that, but I think it was just too much all the time. Never brought it down. I wasn't into it. So to keep coming at me with it was very distasteful. I am very shocked that my star rating for this is a 1.5 out of 5 stars. One of the lowest scores that I have given in a very long time, which
Yikes.
interestingly enough, the last time I gave 1.5 star, I think it was to Wild Strawberries, which is like this super highly regarded film. One of Stanley Kubrick's favorite films of all time, Criterion Collection, super art film. So at least I feel like I have earned my chops. Like, you know, I treat everything the same. I consider it all the same.
Sure.
I can hate a fun popcorn film just as much as I can hate a serious Criterion film. And I can love them both equally as well. This one,
That's
like
true.
I said, the fact that I literally had to pause it every 20 minutes and pace around the house and just, okay, here we go. Like it was painful. What you got, buddy?
Well, you know, this whole conversation has been very shocking to me because as I was watching this film, I just kept thinking in my head, like, oh, Jason's going to love this. And it sounds like you did too. You were expecting yourself to really enjoy this.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. If I ever seemed like I was on my back foot for this episode, it's just because, like I said, when I was coming on camera for this today and preparing all my notes, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get into this with Jason. We're going to talk about all the things we love. And here we are. Not so much. So anyways.
But it's good because we like agree way too much on films, dude. We have like 4 or 5 episodes that we've like disagreed on stuff on. And then everything else, it's like, we're like right there. So this is another, going back to, what was it, episode 3, The Lives of Others, from the original podcast? Yeah.
Yeah, because even the things we've disliked just like with all our hearts together.
Yeah.
Like Dale and Tucker versus Evil or Wild Strawberries. These are movies that didn't work for either of us, and we were very passionate about that too. So usually we're in this together, but you know, we're Speed and Racer X, you know, just going down the road of hate together, but not today. But you're right. This makes for interesting conversation. I would say that there are plenty of people in both our camps on this. So if you're out there, definitely, like Jason said, chime in the comments. Let us know what you think. But as far as what I think, my star rating for today is going to be 4.25 stars, Jason.
Awesome. Yep.
Own the Blu-ray. Cannot wait to get into it. Hey, listen, if you're out there, Wachowskis, make the 4K. I want the 4K. Please. I want to see it better.
Also, someone
HDR,
chime in
baby.
if it's Wachowskis or Wachowskis, because I've picked up on this, that we've both been pronouncing it differently. So,
sure.
We should have asked Tyson. There would have been another come in. You know, he
What do you
would've done
say?
the same
You
thing.
say
He would've-
Wachowskis?
I say Wachowskis. Yeah, you say Wachowskis.
Okay.
He gave
So
3
if you
out of
hated
5. So
if you hated this film, it's Wachowskis, and if you like this film, it's Wachowskis.
Yes, and either way, whether you love or hate this program, once again, hit us up with those likes, subscribes, and follows. Let us know what you thought. You can also, I also did want to say that we are on the social medias, so you can check us out on Instagram. We're on TikTok right now as well, esotericacinema.com. One way or another, just get in touch with us. Let us know what you thought. We'd love to hear what you have to say, as well as share those opinions with the rest of the world. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. He's Ryan Siebold. I'm Jason Peters. This has been Esoterica Cinema. Enjoy the movies.